welcome everyone to a mag builds refresh. Now, obviously, many of you are probably playing with the AOI skin and the new Gemini stuff at this point, and mag is long overdue for a builds refresh for me. So, let's talk about where mag is currently and what is the best stuff to be doing on her. With that, we first and foremost are of course going to talk about the shards that I'm using. As you can see, I'm only on one shard. I'm on a casting speed Tau shard. This is very, very nice for Mag, as she has some of the longer casting times in the game, and she really benefits from being able to cast a lot. But totally not required. You do not need this. Otherwise, obviously, you don't need anything else. I'm not using anything else. There are things that can make this better that I do want to talk about. More strength is always going to be good because various multipliers will get increased on this build. You can, if you have a ton of extra blue shards, as many people do, just dump a bunch of like shield shards in here, and that's going to make you harder to kill. So defensively, you can toss that in here. Also, we do run flow in this build, so if you're more comfortable at a lower amount of energy, you can throw in the energy max shards in this build as well, and possibly replace flow from this build. So lots of options here. If you want more duration, though for the build we're going to be showing that's a little unnecessary, you could also do that as well if you're a little bit more comfortable at higher duration. Lots of good choices. You could toss an equilibrium in here if you're not quite comfortable with the energy economy. Many things that you could be doing here, but it is all really unnecessary and just kind of lets you flex the build around a little bit, as we're going to talk about. With that, the build currently looks like this. We are subsuming over her 3 with Breach Surge. It is worth noting there's really no right thing to subsume over between pull and her 3. Her 3 can allow you to like instantly put your shields back on, which is useful, or pull can be used with greedy pull for looting stuff. And then also, of course, like just pulling enemies into a ball and meleeing them down is an option, or just using like whatever AOE weapon you want to. All of that is very good, and you can kind of just option select between her 1 or her 3 on whatever you want to keep, and it's going to run basically the same either way you go. It's really up to preference. Breach Surge, however, is a phenomenal subsume on her because of its synergy with Magnetize, which we'll be showing off, and we'll get more into exactly what it does whenever we're actually showing it, so things are more clear. Otherwise, though, this build needs a ton of range. We need a lot of range. We want the explosion for Magnetize to kill basically everything, and with the 40-meter range, it is going to be doing that. I will be touching basically everything that it can see on basically every tile set outside of the open worlds, and even on those, it's going to kill everything that you're going to be interacting with in normal course. Also, the just total range of Magnetize is quite large here. Things entering those fields are usually going to die from the tick damage that we're going to be accruing. And of course, we want the range for Breach Surge at a hefty 47-meter radius so that it is affecting as many enemies as possible, which not only adds to our survivability, but also just blinding the enemies and making it so that they don't do anything bad. In addition to that, Crush also wants range, removing the armor from everything, and once again, a 47-meter radius is quite good. Also, because we are using the Crush Augment, that is going to be stunning them and removing their armor, along with the huge amount of shields that we're going to be getting per enemy that we damage with it. Now, for the stuff in this build, obviously we have all the range that I just talked about. Energy-wise, we're on Energy Siphon, Energy Nexus, and on Primed Flow. This makes for a very comfortable energy economy, especially if you pair it with any of the companion energy that you can be going for. Like I said, Prime Flow, this can be removed, just like maybe 2 blue shards is probably comfortable for a lot of people. This energy max is very, very high, but I would suggest if you're going to drop this, a couple of blue shards will do you well. This could be other things like Streamline, and you could just go more power strength with like another Augur mod here if you wanted to go that way. In terms of Energy Nexus, if you are going to go for another forma for Archon Stretch, because you're going to have a synergy where you're going to be able to trigger Archon Stretch, this 2 energy a second, if you're going to be getting it consistently, is about equivalent to Energy Nexus. So you could also upgrade this to Archon Stretch and replace Energy Nexus with, like I said, like a Streamline, another Augur mod, a couple different changes you can make in there. Even like something like Cunning Drift is an option you could go for if you really feel like you want to max out that range, or another defensive mod. Defensively, we're only on Arcane Aegis and Primed Redirection. Primed Redirection is pretty much equal to Adaptation from my testing, but if you use them both together, that is, of course, going to be much better. So, if you want to drop out Energy Nexus for Adaptation for even more survivability, because you're upgrading to Archon Stretch over the regular Stretch and you have a way to trigger it, that's pretty good. If you want to throw in blue shards so that you don't need Primed Flow here and throw in Adaptation for way more survivability, that's also really good. So a few different options for like places to go with the build if you feel like you need to. Me personally, I'm not really having any trouble surviving on this build, even just with Redirection plus Aegis, so I didn't really feel it was needed, but I did want to talk about it. Now, The strength on this build is a point of contention, and I've done a few different things on it, and they do work, but I feel like the Umbral Intensify is the best thing that I've used. The reason for that is because if we run Umbral Intensify, we keep our multipliers to start on Magnetize and Breach Surge considerably over 1. If they're under 1, which they will be if we just drop out this Umbral Intensify, you'll see this becomes 0.8, and this also becomes 0.8 because the multipliers stay the same. And you really don't want to be below 1 if you can help it. You can run Precision Intensify instead of Umbral Intensify and start with those multipliers below 1, but then you need to get a certain amount of kills for Molt Augmented to get you above 1, and then the more you are above 1, the better the combo between your 2 and your 3 will be. So starting there is ideal. The downside to Umbral Intensify over Precision Intensify is, number one, it's expensive. This is a Prime mod. It takes a lot to level. And we don't start with a full armor strip right away. Now, once Molt Augmented is pretty much all the way built up, R4 suddenly becomes a full armor strip. But after the nerfs to armor, whenever things were changed, I do think that this much armor reduction to starting on 62 and like having that get better as you get kills, I think is better, and having these multipliers start higher so that your combo kind of works right away, I think that's overall better. Other than that, we're on Prime Sure-Footed. Not necessary, just always comfortable. You know, not getting knocked down will mean that you're casting more and able to just plow through things you otherwise wouldn't be. And that's kind of what the build is. Other options, if you don't want to do this build, which is kind of like a bomber build, I would say, you're kind of just building very strong magnetizes and then just like letting them pop. You could opt on this build notably to drop Augur Reach and go for her other augment, which is going to be Magnetized Discharge. This will give you more magnetized range. It'll lower the range on your 3 and on your 4 a little bit, but that's like fine if you want to be able to pop your magnetizes. For me personally, I like to be able to cast magnetize consistently on enemies outside of the magnetize I currently reside in. That gets a little weird whenever you use Magnetized Discharge. I really do wish that this was not a recast. I wish I could hold to blow up all my magnetizes. That would be really convenient, but unfortunately it is not that way. And the disarm from this doesn't really make much difference. Other subsume choices, though, there are many. Well, there are many and there are few. There's Well of Life, which is new. With the changes to Trinity, it's kind of a more defensively focused build where you get to put Well of Life on an enemy, and then you cast your Magnetize on them. Well of Life makes the enemy invulnerable. If you die, they die instead. And in addition to that, because the enemy is invulnerable and inside Magnetize, they don't die, which means that Magnetize will always be sucking in new enemies, dealing its tick damage and ideally killing them instantly as they enter the orb. That happens more on regular path than it does on steel path, but it is another way to take the build. Also, notably, Well of Life will make it so that you are immune to any damage from statuses. So, you know, electric procs, slash procs, and the like won't be able to hurt you whenever you're under that, which is quite nice. Overall, it's a decent option that I enjoyed playing with. You can see I was still messing with Precision Intensify whenever I was trying this out. But I do just think that right now, the Breach Surge variant is much, much better because of the output that it can provide. Now, weapon-wise, if you do want to charge up your 2 and also have an easy time clearing it, the Exergis has some new technology. This is the build for the Exergis. It is a very, very high base damage build, which is what Mags 2 wants in order to charge it up. And it can now use Primary Crux to give itself ammo efficiency and the, of course, 300% status chance. Being a shotgun, that means it's a lot of status that you're going to be getting out of it. We're on Elementalist on a heat-focused build here, while we also still get, you know, the viral and the radiation, so pretty wide-ranging here. The big thing is that Shotgun Elementalist with its 60% magazine capacity plus primed ammo stock with its 110% magazine capacity puts us to 3 shots. Whenever that combines with 60% ammo efficiency, it turns the Exergis into a machine gun that can fire 9 times with very, very significant raw damage, which you don't see very often. In addition, it's semi-automatic, so we have that 1.5 punch through, which is, of course, great in Mag's Bubble, and also just for shooting through crowds of enemies. And chilling reload means that reload is not going to slow us down too much. Really enjoyed this a lot. I wouldn't say it's like the best thing to be bringing. Other great options are like the Fel Arcs is more just generally applicable to situations, but the Exergis does a fantastic job of charging up Mags 2, and also like killing enemies is not really a problem for it either. Now, more specifically, what does the combo do? So these are the like usual level 225s, Steel Path. This is the Corrupted group. The thing that this does is you cast your 2 on an enemy. Then you cast 3. And then when they take damage, they make the orbs, and then that kind of just scales. At high levels, you'll want to armor strip, which will also create more of the little orbs from your 3, and then that'll kill everyone. Now to show the damage of this, let's see if I can spawn these guys fast enough. The bubble will break, and then it will deal millions of damage to everyone that it can see. Sometimes being a little weird with it. But yeah, that's the idea, is that you are just creating these little magnetized bombs. You can, of course, cast multiple magnetized fields. So we cast over here, and then on another one here. You can cast it, usually you cast it in multiple areas, but you can cast multiple magnetizes, and you want those to basically be like at 2 different like choke points in the map, ideally. And then as they expire, you will have them blow up, kill everyone that's still around them, and you can kind of just set these up and then walk away, and then they will just be somewhere else exploding and killing guys with millions of damage. If you do have this interact with attenuated enemies, it will continually deal damage to them and build up to obscene amounts of damage, like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of damage on all the enemies around them, because attenuated enemies will just continue to let Breach Surge go crazy and ramp out because they're a timer and not like a real enemy. But the main synergy here is that the particles from Breach Surge add to Magnetize, and they kill all the enemies inside the Magnetize because they get redirected to the center, which is really strong. Of course, it does, yeah, if you use nothing else, it will require you to press your 4, but you can also see great success with this by just simply shooting a little bit, and then that will start kind of the whole reaction off, killing them very nicely. And then, of course, we just spawn this in. You can see just the tick damage that it'll do. This will just be the damage enemies take as they pass through this bubble, and at most levels of play, that'll simply kill them. And then, of course, it'll do 58 million damage to everyone else whenever the bubble expires. Not very long bubbles, and they don't need to be very long because everybody should be dead very quickly. So yeah, in actual like effect of, hey, I'm gonna fight these enemies, we just unpause their AI. They can't really do anything about this. In fact, they will actually start like the trigger of your 3 because of the damage they'll do to each other whenever they try and shoot. So in some cases, they'll all just die because they're trying to fight. So their AI on is actually maybe a little bit stronger of a bubble than you'd get without their AI being on. So yeah, that's what's going on with Mag right now. Of course, you can press your 4 to strip armor and restore your shields to full whenever you want. Press your 1 to group up enemies if you need to be doing that with your 1. I am on the Praetos. That's just for movement speed, though the Praetos is like a solid melee weapon to be bringing around. And the Latum is just doing normal Latum stuff. It's just a good gun to have. With that, though, that is going to do it for the explanation. Let's jump into Steel Path. Notably, this week, I'm not showing 1999. We took some buffs that really drastically change how things contest in the final week of the 1999 calendar. So we are going to be going back to Tav, and then maybe we'll show some other frames whenever we don't take buffs in the coming weeks in 1999. I really wish there was an option to not take some of the outrageous 1999 buffs that we can get. But of course, that is a YouTuber problem. All right, as I said before, we are back on Tav for this test because 1999 is out of control. So let's jump in here. But yeah, this build, like, you know, it really has no issues doing basically anything that I've come across so far. Because Mag is able to so aggressively restore her shields, and because Primed Redirection gives us enough shields to have a maxed out shield gate, we're invincible more often than we aren't. Because we can regenerate so many shields, we also have a lot of opportunities to trigger Arcane Aegis, which is 12 seconds of straight-up invulnerability, essentially. The energy economy, if you're not using Xenarek at the very beginning of the mission, can be a little tough, but it usually evens out. We're also using Diriga here, so we will get some free casts as well. Start us off, we're just going to throw this in here. That affected both sides. We can just shoot the Exert just a little bit. And now this will just, as you can see, it just deals with the enemies. We now have 2, like, just death fields that are down. This one's going to pop first, and that'll just kill all of those guys. And then we can just throw down another. This more cramped tile set, I do also want to note, is, like, just objectively worse for Mag than a more open tile set like we get in 1999. The more open the tile set, the better for Mag. So this will kind of show, like, the, I wouldn't say lowest end of performance for her, but it is definitely, you know, it's the toughest environment you can put her in because her 2 just doesn't do as much as it normally would. Of course, I'm not going to have any trouble because, you know, I've got like 2,000 some shields that I can restore at the drop of a hat. You can see the casting speed helping tremendously alongside the casting speed from the 4 augment to just basically be able to instantaneously, you know, strip all the armor off enemies, or strip a lot of armor to start here, and then restore our shields quite heftily. Of course, that's enemy dependent. However many enemies are there is going to change exactly how much we get, but, you know, not a big deal. Yeah, the Exergus was like a nice little fun gem to find, or kind of come back to, really. You get a couple headshots with this thing, and then just shotgunning with it is quite a good time. Just being able to machine gun down with a weapon that's supposed to have a single shot in it, I think, is hysterical. There's just one enemy here. I won't even shoot him. I'll just let him simmer. Enemies just in general, like, not wanting to come this way, seemingly. Here we go. Set those guys up. Set those guys up the bomb. You know, the usual stuff. Everyone in this hallway is going to die. We'll push this a little bit further. Oh, I think this is actually one of the better Kuva rooms in this direction. But we'll go make sure everyone on this side dies. The combo here is very strong. Breach Surge particles act a little weird, and in this case, that is extremely good for mag. Yeah, just activate this here. Probably want to do like a 2 sides of the room thing. Probably do 1 up here if we can. The Jade Xmas I can just mostly ignore. This bomb's about to go off. You can see how many enemies it'll kill. No good lines of sight on those ones, unfortunately. Probably want to put this one in the hallway. This is one of the things to think about with mag, is that, like, wherever your bubble is, it's line of sight from there that it'll blow up and kill everybody. So you do have to kind of consider exactly what it's going to be able to see. If it went through walls, oh boy, that'd be a new mag order. Yeah, the big thing I really wish that mag had is I wish that her 2, the suction on her 2, was present even if the enemy had died. Because it's, like, very strange that for some reason Magnetize stops pulling enemies in whenever the guy you cast it on dies. It's always been really strange behavior from it, I think. But it is what it is, and as you can see, it's working fine. Kill rate is usually a little below 100 kpm, but again, this tiling is bad for her. We're at 381 right now, though, which is like about on rate, about at that 100, which is good. If spawns stay kind to us, maybe we can, you know, get something going here. And because we're, like, blinding a bunch of enemies and also, you know, have our magnetized bubbles to, like, stop people up in hallways and such, we can kind of get into a situation where we're regenerating our shields in, like, most of these hallways and just kind of, like, going from point to point, getting a ton of energy back. Trying to find, like, where the big concentrations of enemies are and taking them down. Also, instead of using our 4, we could always just save 100 energy at every single one of these junctures by simply firing the Exergus, which is always an option. And that always just does, you know, a stellar job of triggering Surge, and of course, like, adding a considerable amount of damage to the magnetizers at the same time. So whenever you need to build that up, it is easy to do. Diriga also giving us a considerable amount of energy, doing shield restores, priming enemies, so that part doesn't really matter. You can see Misery. Misery doesn't like to be near a magnetized bubble. Not a fan of it. It stacks up damage pretty considerably, and considerable damage is one of the things that Acolytes dislike the most. So it'll be very short-lived. Although I have seen, I believe it's Malice can do some weird things whenever they cast their bubble on yours. Sometimes you get some strange functionality when that's occurring. but it's usually not anything you can't survive. And then the one that has the Loki body, I think for some reason he can block Magnetiz's explosion, but he can't block the ticking damage of it, which is a weird thing. Any of the Acolytes, though, if you cast your 2 on them and then cast your 3 on them, they kill themselves with their own damage. So, nothing to worry about. Yeah, pretty simple stuff here overall. 6 minutes and 33. Falling below that 100 kpm just a little bit. Spawn rate being a little unkind to us. But of course, like, you know, also just the thing that we're doing is... It's weirdly, it doesn't seem like it would be, but it is kind of on the slow side of, like, just what you can be doing. Even though it is, like, a stick and move, kind of, like, set up these bombs, then, like, walk away. You do kind of have to... You're rolling the dice about, like, hey, the enemies do need to have spawned over there. Like, they need to replenish their forces over there whenever I leave a bomb. And it needs to kill, like, a considerable amount of enemies in order to have, like, really been worth it. Otherwise, I killed, like, 3 guys. And then the bomb didn't really do much else, which is a thing to consider. But yes, as far as, like, later game mag stuff is to be doing, this is pretty much as good as it's going to get. Like... Breach Surge scales to pretty much whatever you need it to be doing. Obviously, like, enemies can add to it and such like that. And because Surge makes it scale, it makes your 2 scale with, like, it. So, while Breach Surge has a limit that's been put on it, while it's a helmet ability anyway, it is not really something that's ever going to, like, actually reach its limit. It's almost always just going to be functionally infinity damage that you're dealing whenever these bombs go off. Like, I mean, enemies just don't survive, like, 68 million damage. Like, it's just not what they're in the business of doing. At least not yet, unless they're attenuated. But if they're attenuated, you get to make everything else take, like, 200 million damage, and attenuation isn't actually health anyway. So, kind of apples and oranges there whenever we're talking about that. I am curious, like, for those of you that, like, have been playing 1999, obviously you got to deal with the Desiccants, who are attenuated enemies, who, like, just, you need to spend a certain amount of time on whenever you run into them. Like, they don't die otherwise, unless you have dealing damage to them for, like, you start dealing damage to them, and then a certain amount of time has to pass before they can actually die. I have to wonder, like, I feel like most people don't usually think about fighting those enemies. And, like, just, you know, or like, oh, that guy's tough, whenever really it's just attenuation. But I'm curious, like, how many of you guys, like, just don't like that? Because for me personally, attenuation is not great. I'd always prefer an enemy be, like, mechanically more interesting and have to be dealt with in, like, you know, a proper way, as opposed to, I gotta shoot this guy for a while. Or, like, you know, attenuation, enemies always lasting a certain amount of time and not being able to, like, just be killed via some mechanical trigger means that survivability is just always, and I mean, it already is, but it's always going to be more important than anything else. Which is how Warframe has been for quite some time, where survivability is king, because if you can't die, then how are they going to beat you? Oh, here's Mania. Mania is the one with the Loki body. He can block your 2. But he can't really do much about it other than, like, teleport to you like that. And then he just takes all this tick damage from the bubble, so, you know. We've got a pretty considerably long shield gate, so not really much that he can do about it. But that's 10 minutes. We're at about 900 kills. 90 kpm, still good. Like I said, this is a poor tile set for just, like, what mag is up to. So, you know, not bad, I would say. Like, you get this into a situation where it's, like, once you're in the Scalger tile set, if that tile set doesn't really like to spawn that many enemies, to be clear. But if you get into, like, more open areas, she can do a lot more. But, you know, a lot of Warframes, if they could simply see more enemies, would have a higher KPM. So, kind of something to consider. I wish this line of sight on her, too, was a little bit softer, maybe, as well. It'd help her out, especially in the cluttered tiles you can sometimes end up in. But yeah, that's what's up with mag. Just kind of doing bomber mag things. and it's pretty enjoyable. If you're looking for a way to play Mag now that those Gemini skins are out, obviously people are trying to pilot their wife or whatever, so it's a good time. All right. Hey, turns out you have to record these more often than I have been. My huge apologies, but thank you very much to all of the patrons who have been sticking with. It is very much appreciated because things got weird during the streamathon. But thank you to Athean, Angel SPM, Arbiter Daydream, Barkus, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Canolathra, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Hearththorne, Josh, Luzanth, Mikokel, Minty Ginja, Michta, Nerve, Ruby, Sanyu, Skur, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Zeraphir, Alex Barnum, Club World 3, JC4 Science, and World01, and of course all of the other $5 and $2 patrons. It is extremely appreciated. I'll try and keep this more updated now that the 4 months of Streamathon is over. Good lord. But yeah, lots more guides happening. I think I'm going to be looking to get the site guides like kind of done for at least the CPR, and that's kind of the plan going forward if you're curious on updates for the channel.